As you know, I am in Saudi Arabia and will not return to campus until February 16th. While I am away, I'd like for you to cover Chapter 5 using your textbook and a set of narrated PowerPoint slides that I created. Chapter 5 is the first chapter in the second section of FINA 4810. It covers the basics of how the foreign exchange market works. This section also includes Chapter 6, which explains the international parity conditions that play a role in determining exchange rates, interest rates, and inflation rates. Chapter 7 introduces foreign currency derivatives, including futures contracts and options contracts. But for now, our focus is Chapter 5. The material in Chapter 5 is extremely important because it lays the groundwork for much of what we will cover for the rest of the semester. You will need to study it carefully. If you have questions, please feel free to use the discussion board on ELC or email me directly. Also, keep your book handy as you listen to the PowerPoint presentations because you will need it to refer to tables and figures. In Part 5A, I'll go over the function and structure of the foreign exchange market, which is commonly referred to as the FX market. In Parts 5B, C, and D, the coverage becomes more analytical, so have your calculators ready. Part 5B is devoted to a discussion of the spot market for foreign exchange, including all of the topics listed here. In Part 5C, we take up additional topics related to the spot market, including cross rates and triangular arbitrage. Finally, here's a rundown of the topics for Part 5D, which looks at the forward market as well as exchange-traded currency funds. Before we dive in, let me mention two organizations that provide a wealth of useful data and research on FX markets. First, here's a link to the website for the Bank of International Settlements, which was founded in 1930 and is headquartered in Basel, Switzerland. The BIS is essentially a bank for central banks, and it promotes discussion and collaboration among central banks of countries around the world. Its goal is to promote international financial cooperation and stability. Second, I've provided the URL for the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. There are also specific links to the New York Fed's site, which provide general information on international trade and foreign exchange, as well as data and research on the FX market. You aren't required to visit these sites. I've simply included them as references that you may want to use now or in the future. Okay, so let's begin our discussion of the FX market with two definitions. First, an exchange rate is simply the price of one currency in terms of another. I've said this in class before, but I'll repeat it. As we move forward, it will help if you remember that an exchange rate is just a price. Second, the FX market is where the buying and selling of various currencies happens. The FX market is an over-the-counter market. In other words, there is no central marketplace where currency trading takes place. Instead, FX trading relies on a huge worldwide network, the electronic network, and trading takes place somewhere 24 hours a day. The FX market is the largest financial market in the world, and the Bank for International Settlements estimates that worldwide trading approaches $5 trillion per day. Exhibit 5.1 on page 114 of your text shows the share of FX turnover by country. In 2013, daily trading volume in the UK accounted for 41% of global FX turnover, and this underscores London's position as the major FX trading center. The US is the next largest. It accounts for about 19% of trading volume. Japan and Singapore are also important centers for FX trading. So why do we need foreign currency? Well, there are several reasons. First, the FX market supports international trade. Firms and individuals that are importing goods may need to exchange their domestic currency for foreign currency in order to make payment. And exporters may receive payments in a variety of currencies, so they need to be able to exchange those currencies for their domestic currency. The FX market also facilitates international investments, including foreign direct investment and portfolio investment. These investments are typically purchased using the currency of the country where the investment originates, so foreign investors will need to exchange their domestic currencies for the desired currency. There's also a great deal of speculation in foreign currencies, which refers to the buying or selling of currencies with the intent to make a profit. These anticipated profits may reflect arbitrage opportunities, or they could also be based on speculators' expectations regarding the value of a given currency in the future. We'll talk more about arbitrage and currency speculation in this chapter and others. So the FX market is where the price of one currency is determined in terms of another currency. As your book notes, the FX market encompasses conversion of purchasing power from one currency to another, bank deposits of foreign currency, credit denominated in foreign currency, foreign trade financing, trading in foreign currency options and futures, and currency swaps. While all of these aspects of the FX market may not be clear to you now, don't worry. We will be talking about each of them at some point during the semester. For example, currency swaps are covered way down the road in Chapter 14. The BIS conducts a triennial survey of central banks, and some data from this survey are included in Exhibit 5.3 on page 120 of your text. Take a look, noting that daily turnover in 2013 was over $4.95 trillion, which represents a 33% increase from the 2010 survey. About 41% of turnover occurs on the spot market, which we'll talk about in Part 5b. Trading in the forward market, which I will introduce in Part 5c, accounts for about 14% of turnover. The remaining 45% of trading is FX swaps, which again is the subject of Chapter 14. By the way, FX turnover simply refers to transactions, the buying and selling of foreign currency. Here's some September 2013 data from the BIS on turnover by currency. Not surprisingly, the US dollar tops the list, accounting for 87% of daily turnover. It's followed by the euro, the Japanese yen, the British pound, and so on. Note that the daily turnover figures sum to 200% rather than 100%. Take a minute to think about why that's the case. Well, of course, it's because there are two sides to any currency trade. So anytime a unit of currency is bought by one dealer, it's sold by another. Both sides of the trade are counted in the turnover data. The major participants in the FX market are described on page 114 through 117. I'll cover them briefly here, but please refer to your text for additional information. International commercial banks are the major participants in the FX market. There are over 100 banks that are FX market makers, which means they are continuously willing to buy or sell foreign currencies for their own accounts. International commercial banks also make foreign currency transactions on behalf of their retail customers, which include multinational corporations, money managers, and private speculators. Non-bank dealers, including some investment banks and certain mutual funds, pension funds, and hedge funds, also participate in the FX market. In this case, the investment bank or fund would have a large enough volume of FX trading to make it more efficient to trade directly through its own dealers rather than through a commercial bank. There are also FX brokers who charge a fee to find matches for dealer orders to buy or sell. However, FX brokers are becoming less common with the advent of electronic markets that facilitate the matching service. Finally, as we noted in Chapter 2, central banks participate in the FX market, often with the goal of influencing the exchange rate of their domestic currency or to maintain a pegged or fixed exchange rate. As noted in your text, the FX market is a two-tiered market. First, there's the interbank or wholesale market, which involves trading between international commercial banks and non-bank dealers for their own accounts. The interbank market accounts for over 90% of FX trading volume. Most of this trading involves either speculative or arbitrage transactions. In the case of speculation, the financial institution is trying to correctly predict the future exchange rate and to make a profit based on that expectation. In the case of arbitrage, the institution is trying to profit from a temporary price discrepancy between FX dealers. We'll consider examples of each type of transaction in the material that follows. The second tier is the client or retail market. This refers to international bank transactions on behalf of their customers. Take a look at Exhibit 5.2 on page 115 in your text, which provides data on average FX conversations per hour. Not only do the data underscore the 24-hour operations of the FX market, they also help us see the peak trading periods, which typically occur when two markets are open at the same time. The busiest time occurs at around 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock a.m. Greenwich Mean Time, when both the European and Asian markets are open. 2 o'clock GMT is another busy time, with both the London and American markets simultaneously open. Correspondent banking relationships within the interbank market facilitate FX trading. Specifically, large international commercial banks maintain demand deposit accounts, which are essentially checking accounts, with one another. On the following slide, we'll look at an example to see how correspondent banking makes the FX market operate more efficiently. Consider Maplewood Bicycle, which is a U.S. manufacturer of bikes, and its commercial bank, which is called U.S. Bank. Maplewood wishes to import 100,000 pounds worth of bike frames from the UK company Mercian. Mercian's bank is called UK Bank. Further assume that US Bank and UK Bank have a correspondent banking relationship. Now suppose that US Bank offers Maplewood an exchange rate of $1.6266 per pound, which Maplewood accepts. Note that this exchange rate implies that Maplewood's payment of 100,000 pounds will cost it $162,660. To facilitate making the payment, U.S. Bank will debit Maplewood's account for $162,660 and then credit its own books for this same amount. U.S. Bank then instructs UK Bank to debit U.S. Bank's account there by 100,000 pounds and to credit Mercian's account by the same amount. Thus, Maplewood's payment to Mercian is facilitated quickly and efficiently without the need for shipment of currency or large transactions costs. For a second example of correspondent banking, see page 116 through 117 in your text. On this slide, I've included a list of the major institutions that support correspondent banking relationships. You can read more about each of these on page 117 in your text. And this concludes Part 5A.